Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 7. We are almost there, halfway through. Next week is week 8, and it's technically the midterm time. So in regards to that, next week, I do this usually every semester. I'm going to hand out a survey. I would like to get some feedback from you about how the course is going so far. So just be thinking about that this week, and then next week the survey will be posted. And I would just ask you to just take that seriously. Give me some feedback about things you really enjoy about the course so we can continue those that follow me and take over this course, or as I continue to teach this course in the future, that I may maintain and that you felt like really helped you. And then on the other side, if there are things that you felt were not really beneficial with this course, or things that I'm doing personally as an instructor, please give me feedback on that as well. I give these to my students all the time. I'm very okay with critical feedback, so please don't hesitate to give me that critical feedback if you're thinking, well, I don't want to say something and then it maybe affects our relationship or it could affect my grade. I am in no way that type of instructor. I don't hold grudges. I really do take that stuff seriously. I'm here to improve my practice so I can be the best educator and instructor possible to meet the needs of the students that I have. So just be thinking about that for next week, and then that survey will be posted at midterm. I also will be, next week, since it's midterm, be updating the 2 major assignments that are going to be coming up towards the end of the semester, which is the teacher interview assignment, which is your first real written assignment, and then the classroom management plan, which is technically in lieu of a final exam in this class. So I'll be updating the instructions, the rubrics. That'll all be under the assignment link, which I believe is posted. It may not be visible yet, but it will be visible on Web Campus next week so that you can see those 2 major assignments and be thinking about those and maybe even get a head start on those. So in terms of this week with the discussions, I saw a couple things that I wanted to highlight. I didn't really want to get into it too much in terms of a discussion. I just responded and asked questions this week and maybe made some comments about things that were being said, but there were some things that I just wanted to maybe elaborate more right now. The first one has to do with grades. And I just want to mention this because I saw in a couple different discussions just some ideas and some philosophies about kind of tying grades in with behavior. Well, if they're not participating, you lose points. If they're not doing this, they can lose points. And that is, when I hear that, it strikes a bell for me that I just want to talk about. There's an ample amount of new research and a lot of existing research that is starting to submerge about grades and behavior. And they're trying to separate it. So they're trying to really emphasize that a grade should reflect what a student is learning, what a student knows, understands, and is able to do, and not reflect what necessarily is behavior. So for example, participation points, those types of things, or taking points off because something is late, or adding or giving points for students' behavior if they did something good or if they did something bad. Those kind of things start to skew the purpose of a grade, which is truly to let me know what a student is able to do or know. So as an example, I know this is in our class, this policy is a little bit different. And if you'd like me to elaborate on that in the future, I can. I won't for the sake of this video. But in my high school class, for example, I see a lot of this type of practice where teachers will, well, if you turn something in late, I'm going to take 10% off the grade. And I understand where they're coming from. They're trying to encourage students to be responsible and turn things in on time. But what you're doing is actually grading behavior instead of grading what a student knows. If you're truly going to grade what a student can do and what they can know, then you should be grading that paper for what the rubric is asking them to do, not lateness. And so if a student turns in an A paper in late, they should be getting an A paper. Now, this is what research is saying. Some of you may disagree with that. And I understand that, but this is kind of what we're trying, this is the new wave of what we're trying to accomplish in education. The 10% off of a paper is basically telling a student that even though you've done a work, even though you've worked hard and maybe have taken longer to work on it and have turned it in late, and even for those irresponsible students, what you're doing is you're grading behavior. And a student that truly is capable of doing A-level work is now getting a B or a C or a D, depending on how late they turned it in. So I just want to caution you when you start talking about classroom management and learning how to manage behavior and tying it to grading, that you kind of enter a zone that's a little dangerous and that can really frustrate students, have a very negative effect on students. And I see this with my own students where you get students that start to really just focus on the grade and are only motivated externally on the grade instead of for the sake of learning. So there's a lot of negative side effects, and if you're interested in discussing more of this, I have ample research, ample books that I've read about grading and behavior and those types of things. So I just caution you to think that through as you're developing your philosophy about classroom management, to consider separating grading from behavior. The second thing, I'm going to look at my notes real quick. Oh yes, you're going to see this a lot this week in this chapter. There is no such thing as a perfect management model. Let me give you an example. This week I have talked with a bunch of my colleagues over at Cheyenne, and a lot of us are mentioning something along this lines. Oh, my students are great, but man, this third period class, or that fourth period class, or for me, that seventh period class is really just giving me a tough time. I've talked to colleagues who have made comments like this. Man, I've had this class for 3.5 months and they're finally just starting to get to where I need them to be. I need you to understand that with classroom management, especially this semester, I don't want you to feel like you're walking away and you've developed your philosophy and you have this management model, which is great. That is the purpose of this course. But I don't want you to naively think that you're going to walk into a classroom and that management model that you have defined and really have articulated well is going to work all the time for every student every year. It won't. And I think that's the purpose of really diving into all these alternative approaches into this class, to give you some sound background knowledge. So in the future, when you do face situations like a seventh period class that you can't seem to manage with the management model that you really believe in, that you start having other tools in your belt to approach those students with until you get them to where you need them to be. It just is a part of education. I have a seventh period class that is mostly boys at the end of the day. Boys at the end of the day really need a lot of hands-on learning. Boys in general just need hands-on learning, very kinesthetic type activities. So I have lots of boys that also in a CC class are ADHD and some other types of special ed need behaviors, which we're going to talk more about in upcoming chapters about inclusion and the classrooms that we see in today's 21st century educational world. But it's just a challenge. I have some boys that in the beginning of the year have just made it really difficult for me to incorporate my beliefs of having a productive classroom, a respectful classroom. Don't talk when the teacher talks. Don't exhibit behaviors like walking around the classroom or shouting over each other or being too loud. These types of behaviors, we see. And I see a lot in my seventh period class, and I'm sure my colleagues are seeing a lot in their classes. They just have a certain demographic that they've got to learn to work with. So with that being said, my I guess advice and my counsel for that is to be patient, to understand that you may have a model and it may work, but it may not work the day you walk into the classroom, as this chapter is going to talk about, where you really spend that first week and a half developing procedures and rules and the philosophy and the kind of the day-to-day, here's how my classroom should run. You're doing that in the first week and a half. And in some classes, it clicks. First week and a half, they're up and running, and you've got a great class, and they're going to be fine the rest of the year as long as you can stick consistently with that plan. You have some classes that take, like I said, of my colleague, 3.5 months. Right now with my seventh period class, I see growth, but they're not there yet. So here we are almost 7 weeks into the first quarter, and I'm still struggling to manage that class. So it is what it is, and I just want you to be aware of it doesn't make you a bad teacher, because I know some teachers start to get this, I'm a bad manager, I'm not doing things right. It's not that. It just takes time, and it takes patience. So I just want you to consider that as you read this week's chapter and they discuss that. They'll highlight that theme every now and again. And then as you're going through your practicum experiences, because I know some of you had mentioned too, I think Courtney had talked about in a discussion with another student, I'm sorry, I wish I remember who started that original discussion, but I remember seeing that you were talking about laziness, and that you had in your experience, given your AP government classes, this assignment, only 4 out of 28 did it. And, that is what it is, and you have those classes and those students, and I would argue we have more students nowadays that are probably not necessarily lazy per se. I would use the word as unmotivated. And they're just not motivated to do the work, and there's lots of different reasons for that, and it's our job to continue to try to figure out how to motivate them and how to get them to where we want them to be, and it's a process. And if we see small growth at the end of the year, it is what it is. I'm not going to pretend that every teacher can make this phenomenal great growth with every class, because it's just what it is. We do the best that we can. And if the best that we can is helping that group grow 5-7%, awesome. If we have some classes where we can get them to grow 20-30%, awesome. Growth is growth. and I just want you to consider that. So without going too far off a tangent, let's talk a little bit this week. So this week you're going to have Chapter 7. Make sure that's right. Yep, Chapter 7, Exploring the Process Outcome Approaches. The chapter heavily focuses on a theorist named Frederick Jones. This is gonna ring a bell. This is the guy who talks a lot about classroom procedures, routines, rules, how to enforce those rules and set limits in your classroom. And so a bulk of the chapter talks about him, where some of the rest of the chapter talks about some models and some different other approaches that fit into this category of process outcome. But Frederick Jones is really the one that is kind of the basis, and you'll see a majority of the chapter is taken up by his philosophies and ideas. So read Chapter 7, respond to Chapter 7 discussion questions, which I think in connection with your classroom management plan, one of the discussion questions this week that I'd like you to consider in lieu of being critical and discussing the chapter, in what ways could this apply and what way could this not. Start thinking too, Frederick Jones really mentions rules, right? What rules would you have in your classroom? What rules are you willing to create and enforce? And he's really big on that. So think about that for this week's discussion. You also have Teacher Observation 3. We have 2 more of these. Remember, as I said before, please don't do an observation this week of your teacher in your mentoring, or who's mentoring you. I'm going to give you one more video, and this video is a 9th grade English Language Arts classroom. So a little bit more secondary, a little bit more truly secondary, like higher 9 through 12. And you're going to see some things in that classroom and be looking for the same things. Look for what strategies are being used, what philosophies and management models are being used from what you've studied thus far, and are they being used effectively? In what ways could they have used different management strategies, in your opinion, to make that class run a little bit more smoothly? And you're going to see it in the first couple minutes that there's already these quote-unquote management problems. So watch that video, respond to that video, and that's going to be your Teacher Observation 3. Other than that, wish you the best of this week. You guys are all, you guys and girls, excuse me, everybody, you students are doing fantastic in this class. Keep it up. For any of you that are concerned about your grade or concerned about things that are going on in the class, as always, reach out to me through email, and I will see you next week. Thank you.